we'll call this meeting to order at 7:07. And most of tonight's meeting is going to be the 2021 budget. If no one has anything, we'll just go ahead and start with Caleb.
Go ahead. Scott, can I defer to you on your request you want to make first so we don't forget?
Yeah, so I got two of them. One of them we talked about once before, which was the snow plow that I wanted to purchase from existing funds. I just need an appropriation to move them. There's currently $4,000 in capital improvement for Mark's radio that I would like to move that $4,000 to plow and capital improvement as well, which is 3 line items above it, if I recall correctly. I forgot to bring that sheet with me. And then the other one is in the 200?
Yep.
200 fund, street levy. And that would be it'd be $3,000 from repairs into operating. Which is
What's
about
that for?
a snow plow.
How much is a snow plow?
Oh, the operating will be the snow plow too?
Right, yeah, so that way if you move it into the operating, then I'll use the operating and then the plow line, those 2 line items to make the purchase. I'm waiting on the official quote to come in. It should come in around $9,000 to $9,500. That's the rear plow that I mentioned.
Right.
It's 16 feet wide. It goes onto the back of a truck into a hitch. So that'll be delivered here. They manufacture it in Michigan. Super heavy duty. It's got a Teflon type cutting edge on it, so it'll bounce over potholes and such. But it's a new way of plowing snow, and it's far more popular up north where there's lots of snow, and we'll expand our capacity quite a bit, especially because it'll be on a 1/2-ton truck or 3/4 ton truck rather, and doesn't require CDL to plow. So that'll raise our total plows from 3 to 4. And then the last one was we have another indigent claim for $500. I don't even remember where we even talked about pulling that
I think
from.
it was the general one.
It's in the general fund. Just
500 pull over there.
Yeah, we just have to add.
Okay.
Add to it.
Okay,
And I think that was it. Was there a third?
We have an engine.
See you
Line
again?
item? We have an engine.
didn't we make one?
Yeah, you guys made one 2 general council meetings ago, I think.
Yes,
I think so.
because we just paid a $500 mail, and now we have a $500 female. And oddly enough, they both came in at the same time, and they got confused, or I would have asked you for both of them at the beginning. So
Yeah, we thought there was one because they came in kind of, I don't know, it's kind of confusing, but.
it was. All right. So do you want me to share your?
Yeah, well, actually, if you could share the Excel sheet first, because I do want to show council. This is why we call this our second draft, because there's some stuff that still needs adjusted before we hit final draft, so bear with me. So if you go all the way to the top for me, Scott. So if you notice on the very top,
You want me to shrink it down, Taylor? Or you good?
what is it?
Do you want me to make it smaller or bigger?
No, if you just go to the left some. So,
Scott, can you turn that TV on for us?
You bet.
Because I can see that on that.
so yeah, so if you guys look at the top of your page where it says budget numbers as of 11/10, that's supposed to be over the first column. So that means these are 2020 numbers in your first column. And the second column is the 2021 budget proposal. So 2021 is supposed to be a column over. So that's just a typographical mistake. I want to make sure you guys knew that before we went in too deep. And then there are not page numbers. So I warned before Corey walked in, careful putting too many things out of order because there's not page numbers. And then we'll have to be talking in line item, which will get really confusing. That everybody has their budget packets on there. Scott, I think, has it on the screen. The first page is just the cover sheet, I guess you call it, this is it's summary explanations. The second sheet that's standalone, it says expense and revenue projections for 2021. This would be what we actually are asking council to pass. So this is what you've seen in the past. You've seen in the past until 2020. So this is what's called passing the budget on the fund level and then splitting it between personnel and operating. Which looks like I have a typo in here too, but so anyway, and then it kind of explains the net change in the fund and the estimated fund balance after 2021. Not only is it difficult because that's a full year away, but we haven't ended this year, so there wasn't a good starting point to
You
start
mean
that
the
calculation.
estimated imbalance would be December of 21?
Yep. So without knowing what comes in the next 60 days, it's kind of hard to, so they're pretty conservative. Some of these funds probably be a little bit higher. But I wanted to go conservative because I wasn't sure. So I don't know, Scott, if you want to talk about the process, or do you want me to just?
You can go ahead and push on, and then I'll jump in wherever.
Okay, so the process, just so you guys know, was we took 2020's budget as a framework, which is pretty typical. So we took those numbers, those line items as a framework, the changes you guys have made this year, and then took the revenue, the actual revenue collections that we had so far. We started the revenue collection calculation in September, and then projected how much more revenue we might get from September to December to get a full year's picture. And then remove some of the things that might be one time, some things are just grants, some things are loans. We wanted to know how much revenue might we collect in 2021 by using 2020's numbers. And so we projected into 2021 with revenues. And that was our essential framework. We took the projection of revenues by fund and then broke out into departments. Scott and his department heads did with their 20 budget and try and make them fit into 21's estimated of money, estimated revenues. So we took how much money we thought we'd have in 21, then the budget from 20, and tried to make them fit. But it went actually pretty smoothly, I think. I think probably Jason had the most difficult time just because it was so many departments and also those funds are changing and a lot going on, but difficult in the sense that it just took more time. I don't think it was any more challenging than anybody else's. Just took more time. So then once the department heads submitted all of their items to Scott, we put them all stacked up on top of each other just the way you see them in the 2021 column, the actual 21 column, not the typo. And then made sure each fund still matched what we thought we might bring in. So we didn't want to accidentally present a general fund that was going to spend $1 million more than we were going to bring in and bankrupt the city. So, or come in super under. We didn't want to put $1 million in the bank and just not use it when that's tax dollars that should be used towards services. So that's the quick explainer of process. Was that confusing or is that okay? Okay. So in your packet, I mean, it's more so reading material. So I'll just kind of go over the tops of it. Just talks about what happened in 2020, how, there's two phrases in here that Scott uses a lot that this all kind of hinges on. One is that 2020 was often a triage year. Scott says that all the time. We were kind of staunching bleeding and fixing injuries. Probably don't have to mention the obvious ones. But that 2021, next year would be part of a 5-year plan to make, as Scott says, Nelsonville the star of the Hocking Hills, and a phrase that we really want folks to catch on to, and we want to drive our decisions. So that's what this first page in the packet talks about. Everything in the budget from the department, from the employees to the department heads to Scott's editing, and then the compilation of it all is in that goal. It's even though it's a budget for 1 year, we're trying to shape it so that it's impacting the next 5. in setting us up for success for the next 10 years, with the goal being Nelsonville being the most desirable place to live and visit in the area. So I don't know if you guys want to follow by line item or by department or just in this packet, but most of the things can be summarized here. The police department finds all kinds of savings because their workforce is going to be much younger and much newer. Essentially, if you've been here 25 years, your hourly rate is much higher than if you've been here 1 year. So with that savings and with savings and benefits that are being waived by some of these new guys, there's room in here for a 10th officer that the chief has requested. By moving money from his part-time police to full-time, his budget actually, I think the number was goes up $700. I think it was out of $900,000 or $800,000, only went up $700 and adds a person still. And most of that's in savings and overtime, the hourly wage, and in part-time positions. Council, of course, have to approve that. That's more so a request the chief and the city manager is making to you with this. Overtime being cut by 50%. K-9 expenses and officer will continue to be coming from, not all of the officers' expenses, but many of them will come from donated monies in the K-9 fund. Increase in mayor's court revenue is here. It'll be 3 times more than last year is the hope, because those guys are keeping busy. And the fire department, there are changes like in the part-time fire, they've been paying into Social Security. Harry, myself, and the city manager are on agreement that we're not comfortable with that past practice, and we want to switch them to OPERS, which is pretty much standard everywhere for any government position. And this budget encompasses that. There continues to be investments in the chief's capital improvements, equipment, fire trucks, repairs, trainings, a ton of education. If you ever walk in, they all have a textbook for taking a test and continuing to better themselves. And then anyone who knows the chief knows he brings in a ton of grants and turns 10,000 into 30,000 just by looking at it. So I don't think any of those expectations will change, and they'll continue to be one of the strongest in the area. Code enforcement, there's an increase, obviously, in code enforcement's activity and enforcement. So this budget tries to take that into account. It continues this year's practice of increasing operating supplies and funding, as well as some money in there for tear down expenses, for tearing down houses. Since the land bank is running into funding shortfalls, their teardowns are slowing down. So we wanted to make sure, all of us at the city wanted to make sure that there was some funds for that. Auditor's office, I don't know that my funding here will be that different 12 months from now than it is today. Although I can just say it's much different than 12 months ago. Much of the money and time is being spent on revenue generating activities. And my employees probably are annoyed from hearing me saying it all the time. If we're not spending our time generating more money for the fire chief, police chief, city manager, all them, what are we doing? So most of my funds are put into revenue collections, water abatement, efficiencies with water bill collections, et cetera, et cetera. Let's see, other general fund items. Some major general fund items are, you'll notice an increase in 911 cost. That's in the 100,624 section. That's because at the moment, we're going to be concurrently running 2 contracts for 911 service. The city manager can probably speak in more detail, but at some point we probably will have to resolve that situation. That's not a situation we can afford all of 2021.
So we still have to decide if we're gonna go with Hocking College next year, though, right?
Correct. So we're at the point now, and it's, it was one of those points of contention in one of the letters we got, but The reality is we are running both now. We still have our existing contract with 911. Nothing's changed other than their process. We've paid up last January to the end of this year, and we, as you know, didn't take that money or cancel the contract early. So the contract, we need to act by January or continue to pay. Also, with Hawking College, that dollar amount is based off what she mentioned when we first started working these, and actually we need to nail that down and get a total cost. So the total cost number, or the number advertised when we started talking about this a few months back, was $75,000. I just got to confirm if that's still good with Hawking College or not. However, the $48,000, again, totally up to council if they want to move forward, but that is something that we're going to have to take action on rather quickly. The contract terms require 6-month notification. However, that very polite letter that they just sent us looks like they're willing to work with us. And so if we're fortunate enough, then there won't be any penalties for not giving the 6-month notice, and we can just cancel and part ways if that's what we decide to do at the end of December, or whatever council wants to do going forward.
Sounds like we need to have a police and fire meeting pretty quick then.
Okay.
And that's a meeting we'll have to have, Chief Fitch to ensure that, we can discuss that in full detail, and maybe even somebody from Hawking.
So,
Because, I want to know how it's working, how it's, what kind of, are we having issues, that kind of stuff, so.
Everything that I know of so far.
Chief Tim's in,
$21,000.
I agree.
Chief Tim's in, Chief Hitchin.
So there's no date we'll make that happen.
Mhm.
Everything that I have heard so far indicates to a very positive relationship and a very successful transition. Any little quirks have been just that, little quirks, and they've worked them out and moved forward. And as far as I know, they're starting to synergize and move forward and build momentum.
I think it's awesome that they call, citizens can actually call, and our police department can get dispatched immediately.
Okay. Just moving on, there's an increase in IT support, you'll notice, as the city works, I wrote here, it's kind of wordsmithing, but the city works to get its technology up to par with the needs of its citizens. Anyone who's spent 10 minutes in here knows that we got to invest in our IT technology, other upgrades like that. $15,000 is set aside for building repairs to City Hall. As far as I can tell, I haven't seen City Hall repairs set aside as far back as my books go, which isn't forever. They switched to paper at some point, so as long as my electronic books, I should say. But anyone who's been in the building can see some spots are getting pretty desperate for repair. So the city manager asked that city council approve building repair money. Parks and Recreation on page 3, not a huge change. The Parks and Rec funding is pretty limited, so there's really only so much we can change with that. And as far as I can tell, there wasn't much change. Capital improvement, well, let's just get out of the way. So the city income tax for the last 8 years has grown slower than expenses. This year, there has been a boost, which is fortunate. We've actually already collected more than in 2019, and that was as of a week ago. So we're doing better. I don't have a good way of guaranteeing whether that's just one-time money, people are just catching up, and it'll just might go back to normal in the future. I'm not sure. So there continues to be some worries there. Our worst scores on our financial report, which if we weren't doing this, I'd present tonight, but we just got Monday, was in income tax. And that report was through December 2019. So with that kind of in mind, the general fund is only supported by a continued 95-5 split. Moving back to an 85-5 would require us to find certainly over $100,000. In the general fund, which is not impossible, but would be difficult, and we'd have to ask ourselves, what are we getting for, what are we losing versus what are we getting by cutting services in the general fund to make room in the capital improvement fund? So keep that in mind, that legislation will be required to be passed with this. The improvement fund in 2021 doesn't see any interruption in services or projects, but will continue to track down towards zero in either 22 or 23. It's not a sky is falling scenario, but it is a scenario where council will have to resolve it within the next 2 years. That could mean moving some of the expenses in there back to departments until it's balanced. It could mean, it certainly in my mind means ending the practice of large projects in the fund from this point on. For example, Church Street, which will cost $75,000 out of pocket next year in the capital improvement fund. There will only be room for about one more of those by the end of the year, just to keep in mind. Just keep that in mind. It's funded by income tax, so the general fund is pretty close, capital improvements pretty close, and they're both funded by the income tax. So I'm not trying to say that's what has to be done, but it's just something to keep in mind in your toolkit moving forward. Moving past capital improvement, the utilities department is the long one. So you'll see in here, the utilities department used to be about 2/3 of the city budget. With all of the major projects going on and investments, they become like 4/5 of the budget. This year, because of the water project and the sewer project, and also an increase in street projects. So I'll start there with streets. You'll see there are several guys in the street, what we would call in the old days, street crew, who do most of their work in the water now. I don't know if most is the right word, but certainly a large proportion, 40, 50.
At least 50%.
Yeah.
If not more.
I mean, entire weeks sometimes spent just on water. So we try to reconcile that so we don't get ourselves in trouble in the future for deducting from the wrong funds. So you'll notice street salaries and benefits, a proportion, a percentage, not a majority, move over to the water crew from street. And that frees up some money for paving in 2021. In fact, if I remember, 170.
Yep.
170,000.
Figured you'd like that one, Carla. We put 170 in paving.
170,000, which I tried to go back to, my electronic books go to 2010. That's the largest city-funded year for street projects in that decade. There, of course, have been times where we got grants or stimulus programs or whatever, but minus those things, that's the largest city-funded. So
We got a little smarter on how the paving operates as far as mobilization fees and tonnage and everything else. So next year we'll be much better prepared for 21. The idea is to have everything mapped out, get it all bidded out, because it's going to have to go out for bid because it'll be such a high number, and then have them come in and do everything back to back. That way there's no every time, as an example, on Chestnut Street, when they came down here the other day, it was $5,000 just for them to pull into Nelsonville. And asphalt was on top of that. And that's all included in that project, so it didn't cost the city anything, but just perspective what it costs to mobilize. So if we get them in town and they do it all at once, we can reduce those types of fees and move forward. So just a few things that we found. Of course, that won't be until we get all the water or know where all the water leaks are underground.
Right, we have to fix the infrastructure before we pay, because.
Absolutely, I have no idea, or no
We're
interest
just-
in paving or
Yeah, we're
anything.
just,
No
Where
interest.
will
in-
that come from?
what, the, like water, so that'll come out of the water fund.
The testing?
No, she was asking, what fund will come out and fix the water line?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I thought you said something.
Yeah, because we just, so many times we pave the street and then go back a month later and cut it up, and now we got to patch again.
Well, I think as a big thank you to the citizens who passed the levy, let's slap some
Mhm.
asphalt down there so they can see
Yeah,
what they're
okay.
getting.
Well, hopefully we can fix some water lines and then the streets are behind it.
Well, and we're also posturing, as you guys remember, that hot box trailer. We've almost got that ordered. That's in, I believe, Taylor's hopper now, which will increase our capacity to repair. And I got one more piece of equipment I want to get those guys. It's an infrared heater. It lays down on top of the asphalt 10 minutes later, over like a pothole, and then they rake it up. You add some fresh asphalt and some asphalt rejuvenator to it, and then tamp it back down. So, which reduces the amount of material you have to have. It's faster repair and so forth.
What about, the milling machine that you were talking about, that attachment?
So the milling machine, I want to rent one first. So I want to rent one next year. I want to see how the guys do with it, and then also I want to see if our machine, our Bobcat, is strong enough to run it. So the bigger ones run off high flow hydraulics, and our Bobcat is a 1990 model, and it has high flow connections, but nobody really knows if it can power a modern piece of equipment at a high flow rate. So we just need to rent one, test it on our piece of equipment. If it doesn't work, then we can rent another Bobcat for a week or two next year just to get everything we need to get done, and then look at capital improvement in the future and what that looks like.
Good.
If we could just for a second, go back to the, police and fire, I know that we did discuss the 10th officer in the police department, which is fine. But wasn't there something in here too for a 4th firefighter?
So I believe it addresses expanding the services into the EMS. It didn't specifically say a 4th because we didn't. So when you guys go look at the number side, the cost of the 4th full-timer, unless I've missed something in version, is on the right-hand side for you guys to make a decision on what that looks like. If you want to put it in there, great. And then we just have to move stuff around to make that happen. So the full intent there is to expand services. The follow-on question is the expanded service with the 4th firefighter. So does that mean we would run 3 per shift at that point, or do we continue to run 2 per shift? If you continue to run 2 per shift, then that would be less part-time hours available, so you could potentially pull some money from there. Or do we want to just bring in funding from somewhere else and fully fund that and run 3 on shift and maintain the same level of support from part-timers? Those are all for you guys to decide.
That'd be an internal Harry question, but,
I think it's, and if I could add to that, Harry and Scott and I all Tuesday, well, it was probably Tuesday evening. We were there pretty late at that point. With Harry, we called Harry. The other issue just is, I mean, if you look at the I don't know what you want to call it, the chart, it says expense and revenue projections for 21. We run the general fund within $300 of deficit, out of $1.883 million coming in. So, I mean, when we were talking, we were asking the hard questions as far as like, okay, well, where would we, how much would that cost? Which would be 40 plus benefits roughly.
Yeah, $39,960 step 1 for a firefighter plus the benefit package.
Which it could range anywhere from, at that point, 60 to 85, depending if it was single or family coverage. So the question became,
it's a little high for.
well, our family plan's $36,000 a year. So it could, I mean, it could be substantial. So I mean, I'm not saying we don't need it. My argument just was, well, kind of like Scott put it, we kind of would like to put it in council's.
So
Hard to say.
199 is what this year's salaries were and projected.
No, the projection for a 4th firefighter, those numbers aren't in there.
Right.
Why?
It's not there. It is actually electronically in copies that Scott and I have. It is not added to this, maybe just because Taylor probably had these printed off before Scott and I had those numbers. So 39,960 is the projected addition just for payroll for a 4th full-time firefighter, step 1. The numbers that I do not have, are the numbers that Taylor's office deals with as far as medical, dental, vision, life, stuff like that.
And P&F. It'd be about 18% of the salary increase just to match the pension. Well, it's 16 and then we match 2%.
So just for clarification, back to the PD. So adding the 10th officer to PD.
Well,
only
I
increased
get
700.
theirs.
Right, I just wanted, You asked why it wasn't put in there. I mean, it's a $50,000 addition. So if you guys want to make that addition, no problem. I was just trying to explain the difference, why it was in one and not in the other.
Plus 18%. Well, for years, didn't we pay for a ghost firefighter?
That's the point.
Moving on.
Well, yeah, so this point we come up on towards the end too. Just finishing with the street here, you mentioned the equipment he's trying to invest in, including alleys. I know alleys has been on the city manager's radar big time, so if I could speak for him, I know that will be something he's working on. And then this, even with these large investments, the street funds will be stable into 2022 due to increased gas tax funding, which it gives us a nice boost of $75,000 a year.
So what would the alleys be coming out of? What fund?
Well, so it's a mix. So when you're looking at street funds, you're looking at all the 200s. So 200, 210, 220, 230.
But all street funds, not general, just all street
Yep.
funds.
Right? Exactly. Moving on, the water crew, I just kind of wordsmithing again. The water crew works their butts off and is doing a ton. And then we're going to add one of the largest water projects minus the water plant in city history. So that's going to make them even busier as we replace water meters and all kinds of stuff they're doing next year. And that is, you can see in here. So if anybody has had memory of prior budgets, the water fund usually runs around 1.4 million. This one's 3.4. That's due to the large grant project for water meter replacements. In similar situation with water and sewer plants, there's a lot going on, but you won't see a lot different in their line items until we finish these big projects. Some little things, you'll notice some money coming out of funds you don't usually hear from. Aquatic Center Fund, Water Capital Improvement Fund, Sewer Capital Improvement Fund, and there might be one more. But moving on, this is just to clear up the books. The Aquatic Center Fund, we stopped using it 4 or 5 years ago, but there's $812.13 left in it. Same thing with the Water and Sewer Fund, Capital Improvement Funds, $9,000 and $13,000 just sitting there doing no good. It'd be a lot easier to just use those towards their intended purposes and close the funds so that they're not taking up space.
And it would just go into the capital improvement.
Yeah, they have similar restrictions. So the water capital improvement would have to go towards a water capital improvement project, something that has long-standing lifespan. So then at the bottom, we tried to summarize some of the choices ahead. Let's see, I'll start longer term. Sewer plant loans will start coming into play in 2022 and 3. We currently don't run enough of a surplus to pay for those today. So keep in mind that the sewer fund still is a fund that we will either need to increase revenue or decrease expenses over the next year or two. We already discussed 911. The general fund we sort of got into, and we put some suggestions for council of possible solutions. So it could involve the most quick and efficient and effective ways to increase revenue in the general fund is rental registration, the income tax, mayor's court, and a safety levy. Safety levy would be fire and police is what most cities use that term for. And then those types of things could fund things like, expanding the general fund and also other services discussed around town. And then this budget assumes council following through, as well as city manager, who I believe has already decided on the original plan set forward to raise water and sewer rates. So they are.
Just a refresher on that, we had RCAP come in here and meet with everyone, probably 6 months ago.
Mhm.
And it was discussed that the only way to sustain the upcoming payments is to increase, I believe it was 8% for both water and sewer every 6 months for the next 3 years, roughly.
something like that.
It was hefty.
So, the sewer, of course, will be a council action. If we have a utility meeting soon, we can bring that up to Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I think that actually did come up and that's, you know, Michael gave us a projection of what we'd have to raise it.
Yes, sir. And we're also a little bit behind too, because Carbon Hill isn't online yet. They're starting to come online now that you guys passed that latest legislation for the permits. I don't believe we've issued a permit just yet, but that was the, if I recall, the final step before we can have people start hooking up.
One quick thing missed in the line items was, and Harry told both of us actually, Tuesday, they're in his uniform line items, which you'll see there's their names, they're named for the individual. There's actually gonna be 3 or 4 more, 4 more.
There's 13 positions in total.
Yeah, so we just didn't.
Yeah, so there's $1,200 missing, that was just able for that one.
Yeah, so that would be different on a final draft, just for you guys, it's a $1,200 difference. And then, if you look through, the expense and revenue projections, which is what we'd like to have council pass, I mean, you'll notice, you know, a little increased spending in the street funds, and, I'm not sure, this capital improvement, losing but not quite as rapidly this year, water and sewer holding relatively steady, and general fund running pretty close. So, yeah, a lot going on, but decisions for the future too. So, I didn't even mention the Economic Development Fund. I thought I wrote it in there, but
You talked about it for the fireworks.
yeah, well, I don't even think I mentioned that, right? So Scott has a plan for signs. He'd like to put entryways, or I think he said, you don't like the gateway idea, but entryways using economic development funds, which kind of just sit there and we don't really use very often.
Clean up all the signs. Of course, it'd have to go to committee, but clean up all the signs coming into town. I know with the previous council, when I first started, that was a sore spot. Just standardizing, getting them all in one place, freshen them up, that sort of stuff.
And then the second thing out of that fund was the city used to provide a lot more for the fireworks show, and certainly Scott and I are asking council, and I'm assuming Harry too. I talked with him today, but there's a notable but not very large increase in the contribution out of the economic development fund to the fireworks show. So I think we've left it at 3,000 since they dropped it like 15 years ago. So as you can imagine, fireworks don't get cheaper. They get more expensive. So hopefully council approves that. That was one thing I was really excited about. I feel like after the wild 2020 we've all had, we probably all enjoy a good.
Do you have any information on what we've took in on that this year, on the?
Economic development? Let's see, this year, I want to say 4,000. It doesn't bring in a ton. It's just off our lodging tax, and it has to go towards, well, it's a state lodging tax and they share part of it with cities. And it's just, it probably would have been a little bit more without the pandemic, but it still held up pretty steady. For years, it just sat there. That's why I think there's almost 20 grand left in it now, because I don't think anybody ever suggested to us that we should use it.
And you say that's from lodging tax?
Mm-hmm.
So if all goes well next year, that should be increased
Mm-hmm.
with the
Should
end
be
opening back up down at Hawking College, and then some of the potential. Do we tax Airbnbs?
It includes them, but Airbnb refuses to add it onto the.
I don't think it included the Hawking College, though, would it?
Yeah, if they open up their hotel again, yeah.
Yeah. They're gonna exempt from that.
Good.
Yeah, that used to be the main driver of it. That used to bring in a pretty good clip of funds until that closed.
I think they have, like 24 bedrooms, I think, 24 rooms.
Which I think is more than we're collecting on now in the whole city. So it makes a big difference.
I don't know if everybody reports.
It's been that is one spot we're definitely working on.
Scott, do you have any questions at all?
No, ma'am, that's what I was just looking at. There's nothing out there in TV land for us. Just a normal post that we put up there, informational.
Yeah, the general picture is at the bottom, if you see net change, this budget looks like it'll probably spend city funds a little quicker than it brings it in. On a whole, a deficit, most of that is capital improvement and the street spending. So with the other funds mostly stable, I feel pretty comfortable with that because that would be, those are situations where, you know, the city manager and the city's trying to invest, and it's not something we're gonna be tied to, it's not a loan payment, that type of thing, so. I still think it'd leave us in a pretty strong position for 2022.
Sounds good, thank you, Taylor. Dan, do you have any more questions here?
Well, just kind of digest this whole thing.
Yeah, me too.
We included the revenue projections for you guys, if you'd like to go through. Some of them are ambitious, Scott and I were talking about it today, we're gonna have to make a very concerted effort in several fronts to fulfill the budget, but I think it's gonna be.
He likes my yard sales, so we can sell more stuff. I think it's 20 grand.
I did, we were trying to make the last few $1,000s work, and I said, well, okay, you gotta find a few things to sell, because I'm adding a few $1,000s to revenue there. And he agreed, so.
Taylor, I have a question. How do you feel about, capital improvement? Capital improvements were, like the fire department, every year, which I purchase firefighting gear, out of that fund. And items that, larger purchases that, regular line items in the budget don't, would not sustain. You feel like we'll still be able to do that in the next couple of years? Fire department, because that's exactly where those items come from.
Yeah, I think, so I was glad to see some of these projections come out a little better for capital improvement. I was worried we were gonna be like, honestly, double as negative as it will be. I thought it was gonna be 150 loss next year. I don't know if you probably looked through, but, there's inclusion of money in there for next year with what you just said in mind, that expectation in mind. I mean, I honestly think if you guys look, I don't have a good solution today, so if anybody asks me for one, it's something I have to think about. But if you look through capital improvements, I mean, we have some large payments like Wood Lane Bridge, $35,000. Church Street repair, $550,000. But if in my packet, it's actually out of pocket about $75,000. So if you take those two, it's $100 grand. And then things like the sewer back truck payment, I mean, $39,000. I guess I don't know a good way to say that. If we don't continue those types of additions in the future, the capital improvement fund will probably be fine. I mean, it'll just be at a lower balance than it used to hang around like $800,000. It probably won't get back to that. But if we don't add these big projects like Church Street to it, Church Street needs it done. I'm more so saying if we assign those to separate funding sources, it should be fine going forward.
So we've never looked at, I know right now we're at 95.5 on, we ever looked at, and then it used to be 85.15. We ever looked at maybe 90.10?
That's what I had written down here too, to talk about next time, yeah, got it right?
I didn't do it before this meeting.
I mean, because that's something maybe we could look at versus, going back to 85.15 or staying at a 95.5. I don't
like them.
I don't think that capital fund group could survive at 95.5.
It certainly, if we did that forever, it would operate at a lower. I mean, I'm not trying to call it departments, but I don't know how long sewer back truck. I don't know how long that payment is, but it's 39 grand. I mean, if that was moved or paid off, that'd be half of the deficit for that fund. And then, of course, I know Harry's truck is 2 more years. And so that's the kind of stuff I'm keeping in mind, that truck, the chief's truck falls off when it's paid off, the sewer back truck falls off, Wood Lane and Church Street fall off, the fund will run.
Right, but I'm just saying, if we looked at a 90-10, see what that would look like.
Yeah, I mean, we could. I mean.
That brings up a good point because we do not have yet a replacement plan in place for apparatus. We really need to start looking at replacing fire apparatus and have a schedule in place. Because we need to anticipate within the next 10 years replacing the ladder truck, and right now the replacement on the truck is $1.5 million.
Drake, you want to take it from here?
Now,
I can talk all day.
now keep in mind, these are just, what that would equate to, honestly, is what we usually have departments do that is, they will have one or two payments on apparatus like pumpers, and then they'll transition those pumper payments into, one ladder payment, one area. Because we're looking, in 10 years, we'll be 3 years old on that ladder truck. So at that point is when I'm available to actually look at grants to replace an apparatus, because they have to be that old before the grants will actually support replacing them. Because there are so many departments that have aging apparatus that are, not municipal departments, that are volunteer departments. So I can't even look at replacing any of the apparatus we have until it reaches that age. And as Scott can tell you, that we definitely, the past couple of years, have been dumping a lot of money into maintenance on vehicles, just to keep them on the road. That's something to think about for the future as well, because that will come out of capital improvement as well, on top of the stuff that normally does.
I think
it's-
what Home is wondering, they do a fantastic job of maintaining their equipment as well. So, I've been to many fire departments over the years, and they take care of their antiques better than most.
I think it'd be good to maybe put together a timeline for some of our debt that we currently have, and when that will be retired, along with some of the equipment and when it's going to be needing to be replaced.
Right.
And that way it can be timed out, but.
Right.
But if we pull that schedule together for the first quarter of next year, I still don't see anything happening next year for any equipment. It's gonna be years down the road before that happens.
Right.
You're talking about very large dollar items, and we've got to get off some of the books and the stuff we currently have.
I'll get a schedule, replacement schedule together for police and fire, with not anticipating, ordering a new truck next year, just so you guys have that. And,
But I think your ladder truck, you said, what now, 10 years?
do what?
No, 10 years on the ladder truck?
Yeah, the ladder trucks, well, I've got 2 trucks right now that are 20 years old, and then, we've got my first out truck that's, is a 16 model, I think. We want to keep that first out truck at 10 years or newer to keep our ISO rating where it is. That's another thing to think about too, for future conversations, for trying to add to the manpower at the station. Because each person we add on that vehicle, on that apparatus responding to a fire or emergency scene, increases the ISO rating for the city as well. And we are very, very close to transitioning to the next ISO level, which is one number down from where we are now. And these numbers directly affect people's insurance.
Which is,
We're class 4 out of 105.5 point system. We are 2.34 points from a class 3 right now. Which,
and for everybody else out there in TV land, could you explain to them that what a normal firehouse? You want to repeat all that?
that training directly affects those rates as well.
If I could, I just wanted to, the revenue number for a 90-10 split is really easy to come up with. It's just shift 75, it's like 74, so 75,000 from the general fund to the capital improvement. I just wanted to, I guess I just wouldn't know what to take from the general fund. I wouldn't know what to cut, so, I mean, the general fund's like 80% police and fire, and then the rest, I mean, I don't know where you guys would want me to take from in the general fund.
The auditor's office.
Well, we could try, then you get less income tax.
What you're stating is that based on this year's revenues, with that split, there's enough in the general fund to carry but if we take 75 away from that, then.
Yeah, this budget assumes the 95.5 stays.
Right.
But then we're killing the capital improvement, that way, right?
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
well, that's why I put some solutions in there about, it might be a good idea to, I don't
look
know.
at more revenue, I understand that. I'm personally am not gonna support any more increases in fees or taxes until we've proven that we can be good stewards of the money, and this will be our true test this next year.
Sure.
So, and then we'll have a good idea of how our city truly operates without any hindering. Yes, we'll have a large project still going on, and there's gonna be money coming in and going out, for that project, and it's not true revenue coming into the city, but I think that, we really need to reset, if you will, and give us a new basis going forward of what our city actually generates in revenue, and how we are good stewards of that money going forward. So, I'm not gonna support any increases of that type at this point. I'm actually considering, after I look through this, obviously, even, and we'll talk about this more in the police and fire, I wrote down to discuss there, but I know that both departments want another staff member, but now you're talking about another $85,000 per department, which is coming out of the general fund. I would look at possibly, holding off until the second quarter to see how because most of our large payments come out in the first quarter.
Correct.
So, if we throw two other staff members on there, at that point, that's, that could be a little strenuous. Not saying that they won't do their job, pull their weight, and, benefit the city. But just to kind of give us we haven't had a real first quarter in the city, now that we know, for at least 7 years.
Right.
So, I would say that's where I'm at this point, without going through all the numbers initially.
Right. Yeah, I usually take the role, I don't mind saying, because Scott is, and his crews are the drivers, and then I'm to make sure we don't spend $20 million in a year and go belly up, right? So I take the role often of like the no guy, like, do we have the money? Well, not really.
Looks like we're gonna spend about 16 million next year.
Right, I know. So, one thing that I was excited about was working with Scott on this. It was really nice for a change to take a frame of what we have and then try to figure out how do we turn everybody's no's to yeses. We were not able to do that, as we discussed a couple times in a few areas, but we were able to do yes on most of them. But yeah, I mean, if council has a different, has other ideas and different things too, I mean.
Well, I think,
we're here to make it happen.
the other thing is, we obviously need police and fire to discuss, some things there, but I also wrote, I don't know what's going on with the utility committee, but that really needs to be brought back up too, because the whole trash contract and, are we billing, or are they billing, that whole thing, that needs to happen pretty soon too, because that has an impact on some of this discussion that we're having today on this. And then also at the same time, hopefully the pandemic is, subdued and we're moving forward, but I'd like to, we have some new businesses that are wanting to open up, and I think that that's good momentum for us in trying to stay business friendly and continue that. That'll all generate more revenue for the city, as a whole. So that's, those are all things that.
Well, also expanding our footprint, so
Absolutely.
annexing is huge for our city.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot I agree with what you say there. There's an increase in the general fund so far this year, but if you remove one-time state help, and also remove the increase in income taxes, which could be some theft, right? But there's no way that. Alleged, right? Some alleged theft, but there's no way, that $100,000 in cash was taken, because we don't have that many people who pay cash income tax. So the reason I say that is to say, when I start looking for reasons where we've seen these increases, I am a little concerned that it's one time as well, where it's people catching up saying, hey, I think they're serious over at City Hall. Let me get 17, 18, 19 filed and get caught up, which we had a lot of. So I have some similar concerns. If you take that, the one-time state help out for the, mostly through COVID, the general fund didn't increase at all, and which kind of bears out in our numbers here, right? Next year's budget is very similar in the general fund. In the total expenditure, there's a lot of shuffling, but in total expenditure, and we about break even. And then if you take out the increase in income taxes, we are in a position where we were talking back in the spring and winter, where I thought the general fund could hit zero based off of the last 5 years worth of income taxes. So yeah, I don't know what that means for '21. That's why I tried to stay conservative. I didn't project increases in income taxes. I thought that'd be irresponsible to go out that far on a limb. But of course, I hope so. We hope so. We're gonna work our butts off towards it. You can definitely tell there are residents who haven't complied with certain things in the past to hear from us more often. And they don't love it, but it's what we're supposed to do and what I was elected to do, and it's borne out in some collections this year, and it's also borne out really well for some folks. Some folks have actually received income tax refunds because they should have never been paying as much as they should. So in general, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what that all means for '21, but it'll be close, I think.
Okay.
I got a mulligan for when you guys look through on the Parks and Recs. 7,000 for a new pump and motor. I don't believe we put it in there because we're pursuing another avenue. Hope to have an answer pretty soon, and that comes through from a different angle, which would be really nice for the city.
That's for the pool, right?
Yes, sir.
And that'll be additional expenditure, saying.
Right, so things are looking positive for the angle that we're going to get that. However, I just wanted you, because in case it popped in your memory that the pump was bad, it's $6,900 for a new one, and well, the pump electric motor combination. So last year we rebuilt the pump, and then the electric motor died on it, and now to get a new one, which would be more modern, it's the same price. It's the same price for a new one. The difference from last year is it was a 3-month lead time, is why we had. So it took 3 months to get a new one versus the rebuild kit to rebuild the one we had faster. So we were behind the 8 ball on that one.
Hindsight.
Roger that. I just wanted you to be aware in case you looked in there and say, hey, where's the $7,000 motor? We didn't forget about it. We're just working another angle.
Does finance have any questions for me as far as the fire department goes, looking at these numbers?
We haven't actually looked at
I think we need to digest what we got in front of us.
I don't think so.
Oh, I should have mentioned, I'll wait for questions.
Those, we got the funds in here budgeted for the pagers though, correct?
Yep.
Oh, that's just in capital
That's
improvement, that's
the
not in the
capital
fire,
improvement.
okay.
So, yeah, the capital improvement usually doesn't show up in my expense report.
Everyone good?
I was just real quick before we start. I was gonna say, I put it in here and I didn't say it. When you guys are digesting, you probably remember from the past, for whatever reason, my predecessor split the auditor's office 1,000 different ways. Even in the general fund, there would be auditor, deputy auditor, payroll administrator, income tax, and then put that in like 3 funds. And I get splitting up the funds, but I never understood why didn't, it would be like having Harry's salary and Drake's salary and Jeff's salary all split, and then you could like see, it just didn't make sense. So I just put it together, auditor's office. I put it in your little packets, but I didn't say it when I read over it, so.
So the salary is everybody's.
Yeah, it's a combined, it's not income tax, payroll, deputy.
Well, to be honest, I think there was several
Yeah.
roles in there anyhow.
Yeah, it probably was made confusing on purpose, but like, if you take fire department, it just says fire department. So I thought it should just say auditor's office.
Well, I agree. Makes it simpler.
Yeah.
you have anything else?
I think that's it. Did we get approval on those expenses, the plow and the?
Oh, yeah, you folks good with that?
Nah.
There's just two, right?
Yes, the plow,
The plow, indigent.
I'm good with those.
thank you. And I don't have anything showing on Facebook.
So call this meeting will be adjourned at 8:09.